William Aloysius Mills of Marigot St. John, who resided at La Fortune St. Patrick, passed away on Saturday, November 12, 2022, at the age of 84. He was the father of Ermintrude, Justin, Keith and Sheila Mills, and Sandra Peter, all in the UK, grandfather of 13. Many nieces and nephews, including Jean Buffon, Cecil Collins, Oswald Filbert, Dale Mills, and Greta Goddard in Grenada, Rita Collins in Trinidad, Trevor Mills in Tortola, and Eric Mills in the USA. Many grandnieces and grandnephews, including Desiree Collins, Hazel Mills, Sharon Rose Filbert, Caroline, Michael and Angus Buffon. Many great-grandnieces and nephews, including Jewel Collins, Emma and Yuma Buffon. Many other relatives and friends, including the Mills families in Canada, the USA, the UK and Grenada, Mrs. Joan McQueen and parishioners of the St. Patrick's Anglican Church, Mr. and Mrs. Holder, Rufus Smith, Ethelyn Willett, Doyle McQueen and family, Judith Richardson, Flory Richardson, Velda and family of Plains, and friends and neighbours of La Fortune, Marigot, Moya and Tivoli. The funeral of the late William Aloysius Mills of Marigot St. John, who resided at La Fortune St. Patrick, will take place on Wednesday, December 21st at 1:30 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the St. Matthew's Anglican Church, Black Bay, St. John, and entombment will be at the family cemetery, Old Road, Marigot. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Vernal Collins, also known as Teacher Collins, Brother C and Papa, of Montplaisir, who resided at Upper Depredine Street, Grove, St. John, a retired teacher at the St. John's RC School, passed away on Saturday, November 12, 2022, at the age of 83. He was the husband of Vernice Collins, father of Ella Abraham and Michelle Antrobus in the USA, and Dean Noel, stepfather of Jennifer Oxley, Sharon Ned, Patricia Louison, Karen and Royston Charles, grandfather of 33, including Carla Sylvester, Elizabeth and Ethan Abraham, Dionysia and Denicia Noel, Shanika, Frances and Dr. Petra Charles, Shaquelle Mathelin and Daniel Hannibal. Uncle of many, including Angela, Rita, Patricia, Judith, Robert, Val, Cecil and Malcolm. Father-in-law of Errol Abraham. Brother-in-law of Isla Smart, Dolores Modeste, Judy Lewis, Verna and Avis Francis. Many cousins, other relatives and close friends, including the Collins and Mitchell families of Montplaisir, Grand Roy and Marigot, the Charles and Francis families of Grove, the Fleming and Bernardine families of Montnesbitt, Jane Thomas, Catherine Gray, Clemens Mitchell, Cynthia Elias, Dr. Alban Phillip, Nurse Kathleen, members of the St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church, the Boys on the Block, and friends and neighbours of Montplaisir, Grove, and surrounding areas. The funeral service for the late Vernal Collins, also known as Teacher Collins, Brother C and Papa, of Montplaisir, who resided at Upper Depredine Street, Grove, St. John, will take place on Thursday, December 22nd at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the St. Peter's Roman Catholic Church, Grove, and interment will be at the Douglaston Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Rosanna Latouche, also known as Miss Rosie of La Femme St. David, passed away on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, at the age of 97. She was the mother of Raphael Evans, also known as Selwyn, Michael Samuel, also known as Uncle Mikey, Dr. Anselm Latouche, also known as Glenn, Lawrence, Esther, and Albert Latouche, grandmother of 55, great-grandmother of 13, mother-in-law of Jacinta Evans, Claudia Samuel, Maria Latouche, and Denise Latouche, aunt of Gregory de Gans, Jean Brazan, Maureen, Lydia, Helen, and Oris Lewis, caregiver Rachel John. Many cousins, other relatives, and close friends, including Nelsia and John Evans, Joan James, Kelvin Dominic, Yoland Bowen Curtin, the Latouche family, the pastors and members of the Mennonite and Gospel Hall Church, doctors and nurses of the Pedmotar Medical Center, and friends and neighbors of La Femme and surrounding areas. The funeral service for the late Rosanna Latouche, also known as Miss Rosie of La Femme St. David, will take place on Thursday, December 22nd at 11 a.m. Funeral service will be held at the Garden of Remembrance Funeral Chapel, according to Grandance Baptist rites, followed by private cremation. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Percival Kenneth Alexander, also known as Paolo and Uncle Percy of Snellhall St. Patrick, passed away on Sunday, November 20th, 2022, at the age of 92. He was the father of Valerie Caliste, Patsy Forrester, Phyllis Durham, Carol Batiste, and Gillian Alexander. Grandfather of 19, including Bernard Jr., Brian, Brandon, Brianna Forrester, Keisha Caliste, Carla Caliste, Shane Durham, Siobhan Sowell, and Saira. Great-grandfather of 16. Grandfather-in-law of Kadisha and Keisha Forrester. In-laws Carol, Margaret, Rhonda, Merrill, Sharon, Noble, the Forrester family, and Ashley Telesford. Uncle of many including Cuthbert Hostin, Yolande Purcell, Joyce, Davis Hostin, Anne, and Violet. Nephew of Big and Little of Willis. Caregivers Norma, Donna, Clarina McLeish, Narissa Cheddick, Angela Prince, B.J. Forrester, Carol Sargent, and Chantel. Many other relatives and close friends including the Alexander, Best, McLeish, Hostin, Philip, Telesford, Swan and Sargent families, Smallpin, Carlton Alexander, Tillman Thomas, members of the Snellhall Seventh-day Adventist Church, and friends and neighbors of Snellhall and surrounding areas. The funeral service for the late Percival Kenneth Alexander, also known as Paolo and Uncle Percy of Snellhall St. Patrick, will take place on Thursday, December 22nd at 1 p.m. Funeral service will be held at the Snellhall Seventh-day Adventist Church, and interment will be at the Marley Cemetery. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Joan Teresa Joseph, also known as Mommy Joan or Mother, of Shantymel St. Patrick, who resided at Middle River Grove Estate, St. John, passed away on Friday, 16th December 2022, at the age of 71. The funeral arrangements for the late Joan Teresa Joseph, also known as Mommy Joan or Mother, of Shantymel St. Patrick, who resided at Middle River Grove Estate, St. John, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Jean Thomas, also known as Gigi of Birchgrove, who resided at Paradise St. Andrew, passed away on Friday, 16th December 2022, at the age of 74. The funeral arrangements for the late Jean Thomas, also known as Gigi, of Birchgrove, who resided at Paradise St. Andrew, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Keith Fletcher Barry, also known as KB, Strong and 13, of Duquesne St. Mark, who resided at Lassages St. David, passed away on Monday, December 12, 2022, at the age of 65. The funeral arrangements for the late Keith Fletcher Barry, also known as KB, Strong and 13, of Duquesne St. Mark, who resided at Lassages St. David, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Lloyd Scott, also known as Lacroix, and Turner Moore, of Grand Roy St. John, passed away on Wednesday, December 14, 2022, at the age of 65. The funeral arrangements for the late Lloyd Scott, also known as Lacroix, and Turner Moore, of Grand Roy St. John, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Millicent Harris, also known as Miss Millie, of Grand Mall St. George, passed away on Friday, December 16, 2022, at the age of 97. The funeral arrangements for the late Millicent Harris, also known as Miss Millie of Grand Mall St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Evans James, also known as Redman, Pepper, and Uncle Evans of Clogie St. John, passed away on Tuesday, December 13, 2022, at the age of 63. The funeral arrangements for the late Evans James, also known as Redman, Pepper and Uncle Evans of Clogie St. John, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
Anthony Stephen Joseph, also known as Zicky and Bull, of Florida St. John, passed away on Monday, 12th December 2022 at the age of 61. The funeral of the late Anthony Stephen Joseph of Florida St. John will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Theresa Sita Allett, also known as Tokes of Marigot St. John, passed away on Tuesday, 13th December 2022 at the age of 81. The funeral arrangements of the late Theresa Sita Allett will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
Agatha Elizabeth Jeanette Thomas, also known as Grams, Tanti Kate and Kate Andrews of Caliste St. George, passed away on Monday, December 5th, 2022, at the age of 67. The funeral arrangements for the late Agatha Elizabeth Jeanette Thomas, also known as Grams, Tanti Kate and Kate Andrews of Caliste St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Reynold Charles, also known as Ray and Ramcoon, of Monroe Street, Victoria St. Mark, passed away on Saturday, December 10th, 2022, at the age of 49. The funeral arrangements for the late Reynold Charles, also known as Ray and Ramcoon of Monroe Street, Victoria St. Mark, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Dominic Fitzroy McFarlane, also known as Nick, Father and Teacher, of Winwood Carriacou, passed away on Thursday, December 8th, 2022, at the age of 67. The funeral arrangements for the late Dominic Fitzroy McFarlane, also known as Nick, Father and Teacher, of Winwood Carriacou, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Horace Anatole Dialli, also known as Go Papa, of Duquesne St. Mark, passed away on Thursday, December 8th, 2022, at the age of 87. The funeral arrangements for the late Horace Anatole Dialli, also known as Go Papa, of Duquesne St. Mark, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Lacqua Brothers Funeral Home. Kendon Anthony Mark of Lamode St. George, who resided in Brooklyn, New York, died on Saturday, 19th November 2022 in New York, at the age of 37. The funeral arrangements for the late Kendon Anthony Mark of Lamode St. George, who resided in Brooklyn, New York, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Kimberly Bell of Woburn St. George died on Wednesday, December 7th, 2022, at the age of 39. The funeral arrangements for the late Kimberly Bell of Woburn St. George will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Desmond Collins, also known as Casey or Carlo, of Old Wester Hall, St. David, died on Sunday, November 27th, 2022, at the age of 66. The funeral arrangements for the late Desmond Collins, also known as Casey or Carlo, of Old Wester Hall, St. David, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Fiona Frances Worm of St. Jules and Grand Ball, who resided at River Road, St. George, passed away on Thursday, December 1st, 2022, at the age of 54. The funeral arrangements for the late Fiona Frances Worm of St. Jules and Grand Mall, who resided at River Road, St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home. Austin Cosnell Frank, also known as Casino, of Vendham, St. George, died on Tuesday, November 29th, 2022, at the age of 96. The funeral arrangements for the late Austin Cosnell Frank, also known as Casino or Vendome St. George, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements entrusted to Bailey's Funeral Home.
John Jones, also known as Baptiste, of Rose Hill, who resided at Maddie St. Patrick and London, UK, passed away on Friday, 2nd December, at the age of 82. The funeral service for the late John Jones of Rose Hill, who resided at Maddie St. Patrick and London, UK, will be given in a subsequent broadcast. Funeral arrangements have been entrusted to Lacroix Brothers Funeral Home.
The management and staff of MTV extend deepest condolences to those of you whose loved ones have passed on. Thank you for watching.
I am Godwill James, an MD and a member of Gateway Assembly. Medically, death is regarded as an end or a cessation of life. Different groups view death in different perspectives. While some regard death as a continuation of life, others view it as an infeeble form of life. As a Christian, we may want to view death as a separation of the soul from the body. So, whichever way one may view death, I want to say that may the gentle soul of the faithful departed rest in the bosom of the Lord. Amen. I am Godwill James, an MD and a member of Gateway Assembly. Medically, death is regarded as an end or a cessation of life. Various groups have different perspectives about death. While some view death as an infeeble form of life, others also regard it as a continuation of life. As a Christian, death is largely regarded as a separation of the soul from the body. So, whichever way one may want to view death, I want to say that may the gentle soul of the departed rest in peace in the bosom of the Lord. Amen.